And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up right here at AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. and for the 199th time, yes, one away from 200, I'm joined by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
Not 298.
No, someone actually texted me and goes, Botchamania match? I'm like, oh, that's nice.
I couldn't do anything about it because we had scheduled an interview and he was calling in right when you said, can we redo that? I'm like, no, we have a guest.
That's our Psycho Sid moment of the show right there.
I suppose so. I have half the brains that you do.
For those who don't know, I think it's on one of the countdown shows on the network. It's freaking hilarious. The top 10, stuff that makes you cringe, and Shockmaster and Scott Steiner and Dungeon of Doom. It's just makes you shake your head. And one of them was Mike Adamle. I forgot about Mike Adamle.
That was basically every WrestleCraft induction ever.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm sure
they already rattled some royalty check for that. Although the new Death of WCW updated entry is in stores now, so I'm sure he's banking off that.
One more thing about the network, I watched the last episode of Countdown they aired, and
the top 10 attire.
Yeah, you know who's in that episode though? As far as someone who's commenting on the different entries.
Probably CM Punk.
One Man Gang.
Oh, of course.
He looks way different now.
Is he svelte?
No.
Bigger?
No. Bigger.
Wow.
I didn't recognize him. I was like, that can't be One Man Gang. But anyways, enough talk about wrestling. We'll talk about that Thursday night with Stevie and your co-host, whose name I can't remember at this moment.
At this point, it's a rotating cast.
Rotating cast of characters. All right. Well, check out Thursday Night AMP for all the wrestling talk, including the end of the Layfield report, but that's for a different show.
Right.
All right, so this past week we had quite a few shows. We talk about UFC 178, Bellator 126, and a Titan FC show with an interesting main event. We're also going to preview two UFC shows this upcoming weekend. One overseas and one in Halifax, making their debut there. And, of course, another Bellator show, Bellator 127, as well as some interesting news. But before we get to the news, let's talk about UFC 178 and the pay-per-view from Las Vegas, Nevada, with the main event of Demetrius Johnson and Chris Carriazo. Didn't last long as Demetrius Johnson, Mighty Mouse, defends his title in the second round, 229, with a very sweet Kimura.
Yeah, if you thought Carriazo even had a chance, you're a fool. All I can say is he never laid a hand on DJ. He was too quick for him. He was too powerful for him. The result was inevitable, just not the round.
I felt like Mighty Mouse was toying with him. It was more just not if Mighty Mouse will win, but when.
Yeah, you could probably say that and not be inaccurate. And a lot of people were complaining after the fight was over, why the hell did they even make this fight? He's the best flyweight in the world. He's probably one of the 15 best pound-for-pound athletes in UFC. And Chris Carriazo is number 8 in the same division as him. It was perceived to be a huge mismatch. And it was. But there was nobody better available to face DJ.
No, that's not saying something as far as they need more fighters in that division or they need more talented fighters in that division.
Well, it's probably going to get to the point where he's going to clean out the entire division and go up to 135 again.
Wow. Well, I would love to see him fight Ian McCall again, but that's just me.
Well, Ian McCall could probably earn the shot with a couple of more wins, but he's beaten everybody in the upper echelons at least once, if not twice, so guys really have to put together an impressive run to get another crack at him.
Well, Carriazo didn't drop anything in the rankings. He's still ranked number 8.
Yeah, there's really not much reason to move anything around. The champ won, the loser lost, everything stays the same.
Semi-main event, Donald Cerrone beat Eddie Alvarez via decision, 29-28 across the board. If you didn't mark this 2-1 for Cerrone, you have to go back to judging school.
I think so. And the round that you can give Eddie Alvarez is clearly the first. And boy, did Donald Cerrone show me a new side of him in that first round, because Eddie Alvarez is quite deadly with the hands, and Cerrone got tagged over and over and over again by Alvarez, but he didn't drop.
If he would have faltered or slipped or, fell after those unguarded shots to the head, I would have no problem stopping that fight if he wasn't, defending himself. But he ate those shots, and Cerrone just, imposed his will in the second and third rounds, and
particularly with those leg kicks, because
by
the end of that third round, Eddie Alvarez couldn't walk.
No, it reminded me of Strikeforce. Minnie Marquardt, when he couldn't defend those leg kicks and he couldn't walk after that fight.
Right.
Conor McGregor beat Dustin Poirier in a surprise. I'm kidding.
What surprise? No, he said he predicted a knockout. He got the knockout. You can call him Mystic Mac.
Which is we got a confirmation from our friend overseas, Alan, what that is referring to. Check out the review of the show on AngryMarks.com to see what that is.
Well, to briefly summarize it, there was somebody named Mystic Meg who was famous for making predictions in Ireland, and a lot of those predictions weren't accurate, but sort of a local celebrity.
Absolutely. Made short work of Dustin Poirier here, minute 46, and McGregor, he did what he was supposed to do in the ring, in the cage, and then afterwards when he was asked, what do you want to do next, and he basically wanted a title shot, he said he'd go to Brazil and beat Jose Aldo, or if Mendez wins, he'd beat him too.
Mendez. He called him Mini Mendez.
Yeah, Mini Mendez. Mendez responded the next day, and I'm going to paraphrase here. He basically said, why don't you go to Brazil, buy a third row seat, and you can watch greatness.
Okay, sure. I have no doubt UFC will fly him there, all expenses paid, just so they can have a confrontation after that fight, win, lose, or draw.
He should have, scoring cards, so after the round he go a 6 or a 5. That'd be something.
Don't put it past Conor McGregor. He's quite the showman. Did you see that suit he had on at the press conference?
No, of course not.
Nature Boy Ric Flair, spitting image, Irish version of Ric Flair in that suit.
Yeah. If McGregor, wins the title one day, his first title defense has to be in his home country.
You know what? The thing I liked best is when he said, you can give away home soil, or I can just bring all my friends with me, because when I travel, we all travel. Everybody from Ireland is there. He wasn't kidding either. Dana White said 1 out of every 10 tickets sold went to Ireland.
Now let's talk about this for a second, because Dana White said something at the post-fight, basically saying McGregor is a bigger draw than Brock Lesnar and GSP.
Well, that depends on how you define being a big draw. If you mean that people will travel from many, many, many miles away to see you fight and pay for a ticket to do that, then maybe he is. But I would say Lesnar is a draw on pay-per-view. Not that necessarily people will go out of their way to travel to see his fights, but they will buy his fights.
Well, firsthand, GSP fans will travel everywhere to see him.
Well, yeah, hell, I went to Montreal to do it.
Yeah. I think McGregor, he is definitely a draw in the UFC. Is he on the level of Brock and GSP? No, not right now, but he's definitely on his way. I think the difference between GSP and Brock and Conor, the Brock and GSP are champions, or were champions. Until Conor wins a title, he won't be in that same class, in my opinion.
No, he's not even at the Ronda Rousey level right now. He's a star in potential. He could be that big of a draw, but he hasn't arrived yet. Right now he's knocking on the door.
Moving on, Yoel Romero beat Tim Kennedy via TKO, 38 seconds in the third round. Do you think this was an early stoppage?
I think this was crap.
Why is that?
because Yoel Romero took an extra minute to get off his stool at the start of the third round.
And when was the last time you saw that?
I don't know, boxing probably. I can't remember the last time a corner left their stool in the ring, in the cage, whatever, and refused to take it out and let their fighters sit there.
It reminded me of now there's an old drop on F4W. It reminds me of this drop. I'm not sure if you did it, Stevie, or somebody else on the board did this, but it reminded me of, I think it was Joe Rogan complaining about someone spilling the ice in the cage.
That wasn't me, but there's a very famous clip of it that's all over the internet.
And Joe Rogan cuts a promo basically saying how unprofessional it is, and such. And, it's, I can't remember what show. It's one of the earlier shows in UFC, but it's a 5-star rant by Joe Rogan.
Well, actually, I don't think that Spilled Bag of Ice incident was that long ago, because one of my Twitter friends is actually named Spilled Bag of Ice.
You gotta be kidding me.
No, check him out. He's worth following. He's a good guy.
Alright, well, as far as Yoel Romero winning this fight, did you see him winning this fight, like, on the scorecard, or do you think this is BS entirely?
I think it was a round apiece at that point. I think Romero had won the first, Kennedy had won the second, and arguably had knocked Romero out to the point he couldn't continue in the third round. He legitimately couldn't get off his stool. His corner was buying time. They added extra Vaseline, then they had to wipe it off. They acted like they didn't know what was going on. They were giving him time to clear the cobwebs, and that is a blatant violation of the rules.
I expect this in, a state like, I don't know, Texas, but not Las Vegas.
And, of course, Tim Kennedy said he was going to protest because if the fighter can't answer the bell, then the fight should be over. And Romero came back and knocked him out, but he got extra time, which he shouldn't have gotten. So, to me, the only right thing to do would be to make it a no contest, but the NSAC said that's unlikely.
I'm just going to scratch that off my top news item. That was the protest was the first thing on my news list.
Yeah, they've already said little to no chance they'll overturn it.
Yeah. Kicking off the pay-per-view, Kat Zingano beat Amanda Nunes. 121 in the third round TKO. Not a surprise here at all.
Actually, Amanda Nunes got the better of her for a large part of that first round.
But do you think Zingano did enough here to warrant the next title shot?
I think actually it was probably better that she faced some adversity in the first round and took a beating, because people are going to look at that fight now and they're going to say, well, Ronda Rousey could put a beating on her too, but if Amanda Nunes couldn't finish her, then Ronda Rousey won't either, and it'll be a good fight.
And Nunes did go down one spot. Correa goes up one spot to number 8. So as far as Ronda Rousey's concerned, you got Correa, you got Zingano. Doesn't look like we're going to have, oh crap, I'm spacing on her name right now. She's doing Hollywood again. Oh crap, come on, Stevie, what's her name?
Rousey does movies.
No. They're bringing her back. She was in Strikeforce.
Oh, you're talking about Gina Carano.
Thank you, Gina Carano. All I could see was Rousey's name. I couldn't think of her. Oh my god. Doesn't look like she'll be fighting anytime soon. Dana White says dealing with Hollywood people are the worst.
Well, they already signed Holly Holm, so they don't even need Gina Carano. If Ronda runs through the rest of the division, they'll just put Holm against her.
Exactly, which would be a great fight as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's one division. It's not like Mighty Mouse, where when it comes to Rousey, she's got some quality fights still there.
Right, she hasn't beaten everybody twice yet.
Speaking of beating everybody, Dominic Cruz back in the winner's circle yet again, after a huge layoff, beating Takei Mizugaki in the first round, 61 seconds. They actually bonused this fight after the main event, and people are calling this, after this decision, they want Cruz to fight for the title?
Well, he's already back up to number 2 in the bantamweight rankings, so why not?
One fight and sure, you get a title shot. I mean, the bantamweight division was definitely shaken up after this fight because Cruz goes up 8 spots to number 2, and Faber, Assunção, McDonald, Mizugaki, Wineland, Alcantara, Eduardo, and Caraway all drop 1 spot. Eric Perez goes down 1 spot. Bruce Leroy, who lost his last fight, went up 1 spot to number 12.
Well, that's because Dominic Cruz was around 12 on the list before this fight, so he jumps way up, but I think that's merited because he absolutely smoked Takeya Mizugaki, who was a ranked guy in his own right, and he's the former champion, and he never actually lost the title in a fight, so everything about this makes perfect sense. The Dominator came out and dominated, and he's being rewarded.
There is an interesting storyline here. You know, if Cruz gets the title shot, he'd fight TJ Dillashaw.
Or, as he likes to call them, Team Alpha Fail.
And who is also a member of Team Alpha Male that has many fights with Dominic Cruz?
Uriah Faber.
Yeah. So...
Yeah, he said he'll take Faber, he'll take Dillashaw. He doesn't care. Team Alpha Fail is on his list. His words, not mine.
I could see what he's doing, and it's good for promoting the fight coming up. But, you know, I have a real problem with Cruz getting the next title shot. I don't think a 61-second performance warrants a title shot.
Peter, if that's your opinion, that you're entitled. I'm just going to move on.
All right. Well, other fights on the prelims. If you like decisions, this was a show for you. Of the 6 fights on the prelims, 4 went to a decision. We had the knockout by Cruz. The other one that did not go to a decision was the very first fight. Manny the Anvil Gamburian beating Cody Gibson with a guillotine choke very late in the second round at 4:56 to kick off the prelims on the Fight Pass.
And he called out an opponent.
Oh, really? Who did he call out?
Oh, you didn't see this. That's right. It wasn't bonused onto the show.
No.
Yeah, this is hilarious. Ronda Rousey comes over and stands by his side, and she's grinning from ear to ear, and he's like, win, lose, or draw. I said I was going to call him out, and I'm calling him out. Brian Caraway, I want you. I came down to your weight. You can't avoid me forever. Don't be scared, homie.
Oh, no. He didn't do... Oh.
Yes, he did.
And he did the homie line like Diaz.
Yes, he did.
Wow.
And Ronda Rousey was just cackling. She loved it.
I'm sure she did. I'm sure she fed him the lines.
Maybe she did, maybe she did. But either way, they have a potential match now. Caraway and Manny Gamburian. You know, I don't know if that's like the dream matchup in terms of star power, but it'll be a fun fight now that he's actually built it up.
Now, do you think Gamburian is back with this win? I mean, he has ups and downs.
He was getting pretty well beaten up for, I'd say, 9.5 minutes until he got that choke.
Yeah, it's interesting fight for sure. I don't think we're going to see the Manny fighting for any titles any day soon, but as far as entertaining fights, yeah, I'd book that. The only other fight that I do want to mention, Jorge Masvidal beat James Krause, Stephen Thompson beat Patrick Cote, and Brian Ebersol beat John Howard via split decision. And I am actually thinking Ebersol did in fact win this fight. Usually I go back and I check out these fights and, try to see what the judges saw, and I think Ebersol, the right decision was made here.
I have no problem with it.
All right, let's move on to Bellator 126, Slamenko versus Hazley in the main event. Ballsy. Let's start with the prelims, and as far as, there were a lot of knockouts here, some decisions. A guillotine choke by Clifford Starks, beating Jacob Ortiz in the second round. But as far as the main card goes, Mike Richmond beat Ed West with a knockout, 2:44 of the first round. Friend of the show, Bubba Jenkins, beat Thiago Meller via unanimous decision, 30-27, 30-27, and 29-28. Marcin Held beat Patrick Pitbull Ferrari to win the tournament via decision. Now, these scores are wacky.
All right, well, hold on. Just so people aren't confused, this is the older Pitbull, the one who fights at lightweight.
Yes. 30-27, 29-28, and then 30-26. That is definitely a very rare score in mixed martial arts.
Well, there was one round that Held dominated so thoroughly that I would have given him a 10-8.
Yeah?
Yeah, this was an interesting development of Marcin Held because he had noted that he was going to have problems submitting Pitbull because he would be well prepared for that, and Brazilian fighters almost all are top-level jiu-jitsu, so he knew he was going to go for the submissions and try to get them, but he didn't just go for submissions and then do nothing, which you see some guys who are really good at submissions, that's all they do, is they don't get it and they get frustrated and they just sit there. No, Marcin Held turned it up and used some ground and pound and really busted up Patricio Pitbull Ferrari's face.
Yeah, and he advances to a title shot. Does Held win that fight?
I think it's too early to tell.
Yeah.
But at least Held is evolving quickly, which is the thing you want to see for a fighter that young who's had that much success, is that they don't just become a one-note, one-dimensional player. Held is turning into the well-rounded mixed martial artist, which incidentally is something Bubba Jenkins said in his post-fight promo. He said, "I'm a fighter who wrestles now. You can't call me a wrestler who fights."
No, exactly. And you sent me a text during the show praising Bubba Jenkins, saying he's really stepping up and really impressive victory here.
I thought so. I feel like he's proved that he can hang with the elites, and Hugo Miller was no slouch coming in. I mean, the guy was highly touted from Brazil, and we saw what happened last time when they brought in a newcomer in Rafael Cavallo. He gave Brian Rogers a world of hurt.
Yeah. Well, as far as the lightweight title match coming up between Held and Brooks,
well, that's not going to happen because Brooks and Chandler are going to have a unification bout first.
Yeah, that's true. That's going to happen. Well, they had the interim title. They fought for the interim title already.
Right, but they're going to have another fight, and then it's going to become the actual title.
Oh, okay. So Held can, nurse his injuries if he had any, and, just sit on the sidelines and wait, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Right.
But the main event, Halsley beating Alexander Shlemenko, and we have a new middleweight champion with a rear naked choke, 35 seconds. I mean, if you blinked, you missed this fight. And I shouldn't say shocked to the point where my jaw hit the ground, but I was like, he took his back already? Like, what's going on here? Like, did he slip on a banana peel? Shlemenko's a much better fighter than getting tapped out in 35 seconds.
Some people say the fight with Tito Ortiz broke him.
Wow. When was the last time you heard Tito Ortiz broke a man?
Probably been about 8 years, maybe 10.
What do you do now if you're Shlemenko? I mean, do you think you book a rematch, or do you have him, fight somebody else?
I'd say the way he got beaten and how fast he's gotten beat, he has to work his way back to a shot now.
And Halsley just basically rides high as a new champion.
You have found new ways to mangle his name every time now, and I'm not trying to give you the business beater, but it's not Halsley. There's not two L's in it. It's Halsey.
Halsey, okay. Well, as far as Halsey is concerned...
There you go. 8-0 now in Bellator, undefeated, and ran his way through everybody, including the champ.
Yeah, it's one of those things where a 35-second fight, we'll see him fighting again in 2 to 3 months.
It's possible, but I certainly wouldn't give him an immediate rematch with the Bull because he tried to take the Bull by the horns and failed.
You were waiting to say that, weren't you?
I said it in my recap.
All right, let's move on to Titan FC from Cedar Park, Texas. And the reason this is notable is because of the main event. Vinny Malgajeras beat Jason Brills to become Titan's inaugural light heavyweight champion.
Vinny Magalhães.
Magalhães, sorry. He won via an arm triangle choke in the 4th round at 36-second mark.
All right, well, that's kind of what you'd expect from Magalhães, because he's one of those guys who does Abu Dhabi tournaments.
And Jason Brills, he's seen better days, I think, and I don't know if you give a rematch to this one or not. I mean, if fight goes into the 4th round, he got caught with the arm triangle choke. It happens. Maybe you do give him a rematch.
I wouldn't be anxious to.
All right, well, let's move on to this weekend, and there are 2 shows, and
3 shows.
What's that?
3 shows, 2 UFC and 1 Bellator.
2 UFC, that's what I meant. 2 UFC shows and 1 Bellator show. Let's start with the show in Stockholm, Sweden, because that's the first show it's going to be airing due to the time difference. And it's taking place in Stockholm, Sweden, and I wish the Mauler was going to be on this show, because that would have been awesome.
So do they.
But, that didn't happen here. And we do have a main event of Gunnar Nelson fighting Rick the Horror Story.
Yep, I like Nelson in that fight.
Really?
Yeah.
I actually would lean more towards Story, but I could see why people would pick Nelson, but I just think on paper, I think Story's a better fight here. I think a better chance to win here.
I think Nelson loves fighting in Europe. He gets a great reaction and has his best performances there, so I don't see this being any different.
The semi-main event has Akira Kurosani fighting Max Holloway.
Blessed Holloway for the win.
Really?
He's on another level. He's already better at a younger age than Kurosani was when he was his age.
Fair enough. I think Kurosani will get an added boost from the hometown crowd there, but, I don't know. I think Holloway wins this fight for sure.
Yes.
Iri Latifi fights Jan Blachowicz.
Ilir Latifi.
Damn. Some of these names I can get, some of them I just butcher.
It's not your day, Peter, but let's just go on.
I would say Blachowicz is in a world of hurt here.
I think so too. Latifi is one of those guys that trains with all the top fighters in Europe, so even if he isn't quite as well known, I mean, the reason he got known is he filled in as a last minute replacement on a card against Musasi, and he got handed his ass, but everybody expected him to as a late minute replacement. When Ilir Latifi has a full training camp, he does really well.
Now, this is a Fight Pass exclusive show, so not a lot of big names are on this one. The main portion of the card kicks off with Nicholas Backstrom against Mike Wilkinson.
Yeah, it's a fight.
It's a fight. The only fight that catches my eye on the prelims for this show, Dennis Seaver. He's fighting Charles Rosa.
Yeah, well, they like Seaver in Europe, so it's a good place for him to fight.
Absolutely, and looking forward to this one. I'm not sure how many people who are not hardcores are going to watch this show, but it has the potential to be a good show.
Yeah, but with 2 UFC cards in the same day, I think that's the other reason this one's on Fight Pass. Not just because of the time difference, but because they've already accepted people are probably only going to watch one or the other and not both.
All right, well, we'll move on to the show happening in my neck of the woods in Canada, in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
I wouldn't exactly say Nova Scotia is your neck of the woods.
Well, actually, I lived in Halifax for a few years, so...
But it's like way far away from where you are now.
Yeah, it's not like I'm closer to Halifax than I am Vancouver, but... it's one of those shows where it's in a city I used to live in, so I have a little bit of a tie-in there. And actually, for some in-depth talking about this show, I'm going to be on Live 88.5 on Friday morning, around 6:10 in the morning, to talk about this. And we'll have the clip on AngryMarks.com after the appearance. Big shout out to the morning startup on Live 88.5.
Yes.
Moving on to the main card of this show, the main event, Rory McDonald against Tarek Saffiedine. Stevie?
I figured you were going to say more than just read off the names.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say something about the main event. Oh, okay.
I just expected you to have the first crack at it since it was Rory Aries McDonald. I figured you'd have a world of things to say.
Well, I think, McDonald's gonna be very pumped up for this fight. Tarek Saffiedine is definitely a quality opponent for him. They're not giving him a tomato can here in the main event. I think we're gonna see the McDonald we saw in the first couple of rounds when he fought the Nacho-born killer, Carlos Condit. But I think every fight McDonald fights, he learns more and more and becomes a much better fighter. I think the performance here by McDonald will boost him in the rankings. I'm not sure how high he climbs in the rankings after this fight. It depends on how decisive it is. But I got McDonald winning here, not because I'm a homer, but because I think this is a fight that he can definitely win. Tarek Saffiedine, I'm not taking it away from him. If he wins this fight, good for him. He's definitely got the skill set to do it. But I got McDonald in this one.
All right, then.
Moving on, Rafael Assunção fights Brian Caraway, and do you think Manny Gambarino will be in attendance? I don't know.
They might fly him in.
Just have him do like the throat slashing gesture in the stands or something.
Right.
As far as who wins,
Assunção.
You think so?
I like Caraway, but unless he gets a lot of takedowns and does a lot of ground control, I don't see how he stops Assunção from hurting him.
I think Caraway's got a puncher's chance, but I think you're right. I think Assunção, he's the more advanced fighter in my opinion.
Right.
Chad Leprezi fights Yostenis Cedeno.
I believe that's Yostenis Cedeno and Chad Leprezi, who is on Tough Nations.
Yeah, so this is, I'm not saying this is just a fight, but it's going to be you're going to see a lot of Canadians on this show, of course, and, I don't know who to pick in this one. I mean, I could go with the homer pick here, but I think this is a toss-up.
I will agree it's a toss-up fight.
Moving on to the middleweights, Elias
Teodoro.
Thank you. Teodoro fights Bruno Santos, and another fight here. It's, I think it's another one of those local fighters type of thing.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they're probably looking for Teodoro to get a big win here because the last time I saw Santos, he had an ugly, ugly fight with Chris Camozzi that he got the decision, and nobody walked away from that fight happy. So they would probably like either him to win more impressively or Teodoro to win impressively on him. They're looking to gain some momentum from one of these two.
Moving on to the welterweights, Nordine Talib fights Li Jinlang.
Yep, and another veteran of Tough Nations in Talib. Actually, a veteran of almost everything. That guy has been around a lot. In fact, like the week he was on Tough Nations, like the first week, he was also in a fight in Bellator.
Yeah, he's he's been around the block, that's for sure, but I think he wins here. I think it's going to be a decision, but I think he wins 29-28.
All right, then.
And kicking off the main card, Mitch Gagnon fights Roman Salazar.
That's definitely just a fight.
Yeah, it's Gagnon.
Gagnon probably wins.
Yeah, I think for Salazar to win, he's going to have to win it within the three rounds. I don't think he wants it going to the judges.
No.
Well, as far as the prelims are concerned, the only fight that catches my eye is the main event. Darren Cruikshank fights Anthony Njokuani.
Yeah, the Detroit superstar looking to get back on track, and Njokuani, well, he's been around forever, but his last fight, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I think this has potential to be fight of the night, but I mean, it could go that way or it could go the other way as well. Like, Cruikshank, definitely a good fighter, and Njokuani, I think his back is up against the wall in this one. I think he needs to win this and win this one decisively to get back on track as well. So both fighters are looking to prove something here.
Yep.
All right, well, moving on to Bellator 127, and the main event has Daniel Strauss fighting Justin Wilcox.
The Silverback is taking on Daniel Strauss and hoping to stop his momentum because Strauss would like to rebound from losing the title to Pat Curran, which Curran in turn lost to the younger Pitbull Frary. And basically the way I see this going is that if Strauss wins, they can have a third match between him and Curran to determine a new number one contender. And if Wilcox wins, then he shakes things up in that division.
Absolutely. I agree. It's definitely a good main event fight here. I'm going to say Wilcox just because I'd like to see that division get shaken up a little bit.
I want to see Strauss fight the third time with Curran, so I think with a number one contendership on the line, that would be an awesome fight.
Fernando Gonzalez fights Cairo Parisian.
Yeah, this is a late replacement because originally Parisian was supposed to face the former Dream champion Marius Zaromskis, but Zaromskis is out with an injury, and the Menifee Maniac, as Gonzalez is known, is the kind of guy who's a spoiler because he was brought in to face Psycho Carl Amasu, and everybody thought he would just blow through Menifee, and Menifee Maniac proved him wrong and got the decision.
Rob Emerson fights Rafael Silva.
Yeah, the first of two tough veterans on the main card.
Which is interesting. I mean, Emerson's been around the block a few times as well, so it'd be interesting to see what happens here. Rafael Silva, do you think a win here, like a knockout, a decisive win, makes a statement? You know, is Emerson a gatekeeper, or do you think he's got some gas left in the tank?
Well, Emerson is on a multi-fight win streak as far as I recall, and Silva was on a 13-fight win streak until he lost to Joe Warren in a title fight, so I think Silva is probably looking to end Emerson's streak and start a new one.
And kicking off the main card on Spike, Kendall Grove fights Christian Mpumbu. And
this is Mpumbu moving down to the weight class he should have been in all along. He was the former light heavyweight champion of Bellator, but he was awfully small for a light heavyweight, and he lost non-title fights and title fights and every kind of fight you could lose at light heavyweight. So middleweight is the place for him to be.
So Kendall Grove's in the world of hurt, basically, is what you're saying?
I think there's the distinct possibility that Mpumbu at middleweight is too much for him.
Now, there's one prelim here that catches my eye. I'm sure you agree with me on this. Malik Murad fights Sokaju.
Yeah. African Magic Sokaju is on the card.
And speaking of someone who's been around the block, he invented the block. He's been around for how many fights now? I mean...
Well, they used to call him the Pride Killer, so that should tell you.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know why he's in this position. I think a win here, if he can still fight and win, good on him. But if Murad beats him here, does Sokaju become a gatekeeper?
I think prior to his last win in Bellator, Sokaju kind of was a gatekeeper in any promotion he was in. Was that, he had that spectacular run for a brief period of time, but since then he's just a little over 500. Yeah,
I mean, we last saw Sokaju Bellator 121. He won with a rear naked choke in the first round, so that was back in June.
Yeah, that was flashes of the old African Magic that we know, but again, with some of these guys, you just look at the list of fighters they've faced and how many times they've been beaten, and you just think there's a lot of tread on those tires.
Absolutely. Interesting to see what happens. I'm curious to see that fight for sure, but we should move on. We got a lot of news to get to, and you already talked about Tim Kennedy protesting his fight, so we'll just move on from that. We already talked.
Getting popped.
Well, yeah, we'll get there. I'm just trying to get all my notes here in order. Dominic Cruz looks like he'll be getting the title shot. We already talked about that. They're saying that Kat Zingano will be fighting Ronda Rousey at UFC 182 on January the 3rd.
That would be the ideal time. Their first big pay-per-view of the new year.
Why not kick it off with a bang? I get that, but speaking of people who want to go out with a bang, Donald Cerrone wants to fight again this year.
It's working for him. The more fights he takes, the more fights he wins. So until he's proven wrong, he should keep taking a fight as often as he wants.
But do you think too many fights is detrimental to him at this point in his career?
Well, I think the thing that would be detrimental to him would be the beating that Eddie Alvarez gave him in that first round. But other than that, no.
I just think too many fights, I think, will lead to something bad down the road. But, I mean, if he could still fight and produce victories, then why not? But I just worry about his health sometimes,
I understand, but this guy lives by the edge anyway. He finds the edge and then he goes past that because he does wakeboarding, he does, bull riding, he does dangerous extreme things anyway, and for him, taking a fight every 2 to 3 months is probably less extreme than that.
Yeah. We do have a new fight for the Australia show in November as Neil Seery fights Richie Valchik.
Yeah. I'd call that just a fight.
Alan Patrick is out of his fight at UFC 179 in Brazil. We hear about injuries to legs, to knees, what have you. This is more of a nasty injury, Stevie. He's out with a broken jaw.
Yeah, that's the same thing that happened to one of the Tough Nations fighters. You remember who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a gruesome injury, knee, leg, groin, what have you, muscle pull here or there, but a broken jaw, that sucks.
Yeah, it does.
For those watching Dancing with the Stars, I know, Steve, you're a big fan of it, but Randy Couture got voted off this past week.
Yep, that ends that.
So much for Stevie watching to the finale.
The only time I ever really paid close attention was Jericho's season.
Not even Stacy Keibler, huh?
Nah.
There's an interesting fight being rumored for the Mauler Alexander Gustafsson. Rashad Evans wants to fight him.
Well, both of them are theoretically contenders to the title, so if they don't want to sit around and wait, that makes sense.
If he's not going to fight John Jones, I guess it makes sense. I mean, I don't know. I think Gustafsson's so pissed off that he's not fighting John Jones again.
Well, of course he is, but do you want to sit out and wait, or do you want to make some money? That's his choice.
Yeah. Moving on to Bellator. Bellator 128 has lost a fight as John Gunderson is withdrawn from the card. In fact, after 53 fights, John Gunderson is retired from mixed martial arts.
That's that.
Yeah, 12 years, IFL, World Series of Fighting, and of course the UFC.
And now done.
Emmanuel Newton will be headlining Bellator 130, defending his title against Linton Vassell.
And I believe that's also the same card with Lashley.
Yes. Now, you mentioned it before. We should talk about it. For those who saw UFC Fight Night 48, Cung Lee versus Michael Bisping, Cung Lee looked...
healthy.
Well? Healthy? I don't think healthy is the right word.
He looked Overeem-esque.
Yes, and there was a reason he got popped for HGH in the post-fight piss test, and he'll be suspended for, I believe, 7 months? Which I'm surprised. I thought it was a full year for a drug suspension, but I guess HGH isn't on the same level as steroids.
My guess is that he probably had a 60-day medical suspension already, so they just gave him 7 more months and made it 9 months total.
Okay, that makes more sense. But when I saw that, I was like, okay, this isn't something new. You'd think... I don't know why it took this long. You know what I mean? Usually these suspensions are pretty quick.
Well, HGH is hard to detect, so it just took that long to process it.
Yeah, could be. The number 3 lightweight in the UFC, Khabib Nurmagomedov, looks like he'll be coming back in March.
Good job on the pronunciation on that one.
Thank you. Todd Duffy is looking to come back at UFC 181. He's coming back from this is scary, Stevie.
Yeah, I know. This guy probably shouldn't be fighting.
No, he's only 28. And the doctors told me he couldn't even train, not too long ago. But, he came back, fought the disorder, I should say. And now he's back in UFC. If the doctors tell me I got a neurological disorder, I ain't fighting.
Yeah, but I guess from his perspective, it's what he knows how to do best. And again, it's, do you take the fight and make a living, or do you sit on the sideline and do nothing? Those are his choices. But personally, if I was him, you know what, I would make the Edge decision, since we're already talking about pro wrestling on this show.
Yeah.
When Edge was told that one more bump and he'd be paralyzed for life, he said, "Nope, I'm done wrestling, effective immediately." If a doctor told me I had a neurological disorder and that I shouldn't be taking fights or even training for a fight, I'd probably listen.
Well, yeah, definitely true. I can't really add much to that. I will say my last news item here, Dana White has commented on the Yoel Romero-Tim Kennedy controversy, and surprisingly, he says the UFC shares some of the blame here.
Can you elaborate?
Well, I think it's more the referees weren't doing their jobs. When the referee says seconds out and the seconds don't, get everything out of the cage in a certain amount of time, then, I could see why UFC would be at fault here, but I don't know if under the table we didn't hear that Candy got a win bonus, or, I honestly think we're going to see something like a rematch here just to shut everybody up.
Maybe.
Make the fans happy, make them have a rematch, and then we really see who wins that fight.
Sure.
But that's basically all the news I have this week. Is there anything on your list that I forgot to mention?
Nope, that's everything.
Alright, what's on tap for Thursday Night AMP this week?
It's going to be either me and Frank or me and Kev talking about wrestling.
There you go. I'm sure you'll talk about the decision by the WWE to postpone the network in the UK for a month.
Well, they've got some good reasons for that. We'll get into it.
There you go. And of course, I mentioned off the top, the Leafield Report, the newsletter is shutting down. I'm sure we'll talk about that as well.
Of course.
And as I said, don't forget, on Friday morning, if you're in the Ottawa area, 6:10 on Live 88.5, I'll be talking the Halifax Fight Night show on the morning startup, so everybody check that out. Or wait a few hours, you can check out my appearance on there on AngryMarks.com.
Or if you don't want to wait that long and you want to hear more from Peter, check out the Face-Off Circle.
Absolutely. Myself and Chess Army from Super Friends Universe broke down the Eastern Conference very in-depth. We talked about all 15 teams in the East. There's Part 1 is the Atlantic Division, Part 2 is the Metropolitan Division, and next Tuesday night, around midnight, we'll post Part 2 of the Face-Off Circle. Or sorry, I should say episode 3. Part 1 will be, each division will get a part in that one, and
basically you're doing the Western Conference next week.
Absolutely. There was one team in there, I'm not going to say which one, Stevie, because we have a friend of the show who likes this certain team, but one team in training camp, because training camp is still going on right now, they basically devoted some time to teach the players how to properly fight.
Okay, then.
I'm not kidding. It was like, wait, you have to tell these people how to fight? Like, this shouldn't even be... I just found it very wacky, and we're going to talk about that next week on the Face-Off Circle.
All right, well, stay tuned.
All right, well, for Stevie J, I'm Peter H., the Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening, and as I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.